My mom taught me not to keep what isn't mine.
Mom taught me not to keep things that aren't mine. Those comments broke the golden calm of the hotel foyer like a flash through glass. Everyone looked, and for a moment, even the marble walls appeared to echo that tiny voice, clear, soft, and unshakably firm. She was a small girl, maybe 9, with skin the color of mahogany and a smile that could melt stone. Amara was her name, the daughter of a black waitress who worked 12-hour shifts to pay the bills. She appeared little next to the tall glass chandeliers and the glitter of affluence all about her. Her dress was beautifully pressed, and her shoes were clean but old, a wallet in her hand, heavy with cash and made of Italian leather with gold trim, the kind of stuff that people in her world never even touched. Callum Davenport, a wealthy CEO whose name was on skyscrapers from New York to LA, stood in front of her. He looked at her, and then at the wallet. For the first time in years, the guy who had everything felt something that money couldn't buy. Shame. He didn't even know he had dropped it. But this little girl, the daughter of a woman most people disregarded, had just brought it back, unspoiled, unshaken, and unafraid. There were whispers that disturbed the silence. Some people muttered, while others laughed. Someone said, "She could have taken it. Nobody would have known." But Amara just smiled that bright smile again and whispered quietly, "My mama says honesty isn't for sale." That was the moment when everything changed for Callum, Amara, and the world, which too frequently forgets that honesty may come from the most unlikely places. This isn't just another story about being rich and nice. This is a black story about a tiny child whose honesty shook a billionaire to his core. It's about dignity and courage. Stay with this story until the finish, because what occurs next will show you that even the tiniest deed can show the greatest humanity. You're watching Hidden Worth, which is about how the most valuable things about us aren't what we own but who we are. Before that morning at the hotel, very few people knew who Amara Lewis was. She wasn't well known. She didn't go to a private school or live in a nice mansion. But Amara was already remarkable in a little 2-bedroom apartment on the fringe of Savannah, Georgia. It wasn't because of where she lived. It was because of who raised her. Kenya Lewis, her mother, was a waitress at the Grand Mariner Hotel. It was one of those places where everything smelled like money, and no one ever looked the cleaning staff in the eye. People didn't pay any attention to Kenya unless they wanted a refill. To Amara, though, she was a superhero, a mother by herself, a black lady raising a daughter in a world that sought to keep them hidden too frequently. Kenya had laws, not the sort you find in parenting books or TV shows, but the kind that forms a child's soul. She instructed Amara to always say thank you, make her bed every morning, and never retain anything that wasn't hers. It wasn't simply about being honest. It was about being proud. It was about being unshakable, even when the world shook you. They didn't have a lot. Rent took up half of her wages most months. The other half went to Amara's clothes from the thrift store, groceries, and school supplies. Kenya always made sure that Amara's shoes were clean, her hair was groomed, and her heart was full, no matter how bad things got. Their place was little, but it was really clean. They told each other stories over supper, danced to old records in the living room, and read novels they had borrowed from the library. Kenya always remarked, "Baby, we may not have the biggest house, but our love fills every room." Amara never saw her mom complain, not when her feet were painful, not when tips were low, not when customers snapped their fingers like she was furniture. Kenya merely grinned, nodded, and went back to work. Amara, on the other hand, was calmly taking it all in from the sidelines of life. Kenya was distinct not only because she was strong, but also because she quietly believed that character was more important than circumstances. That belief flowed into Amara like sunlight through a window, steady and warm. Amara didn't think twice when she noticed the wallet on the floor. Kenya hadn't simply told her what to do. She demonstrated her, day after day, shift after shift. And that day, the world was finally going to see it too. Tall marble pillars, crystal chandeliers, and velvet rugs that seemed too nice to tread on were all part of the Grand Mariner Hotel lobby's design to make guests feel small. There was money whispering in every corner, and if you didn't belong, you could feel it in your bones. Amara had been there before, waiting silently in the staff lounge for her mom to finish her job or helping carry Kenya's coat after a hard day. She was usually close, calm, and polite. That morning, though, she was in the lobby, close to the front desk, when two boys her age strolled in with their nanny. They wore name-brand clothes, including little designer sneakers and sleek haircuts, and they had the kind of confidence that only comes with money. A boy looked Amara up and down and smiled. "Hey, look," he yelled in a loud voice. "Is she the child of the maid, or maybe she just walked in off the street?" His companion stepped closer and laughed. "She probably hasn't been to a place like this before. Don't make the floor dirty, girl." The remarks wounded, not because they were smart, but because they were meant to. Loud enough for the people at the front desk to hear. Loud enough for several visitors to look over and then quickly look away. Amara felt her cheeks heat. She tightened her grip on the strap of her small bag. But she didn't say anything. She just stood there, with her eyes serene and her face steady, like her mother had told her to. Kenya noticed what was going on across the lobby. She started to walk toward them, but Amara did something that caught her off guard before she could get there. She grinned, a real smile, not a smile to cover up anguish. A real one, bright, easy, and not disturbed. Then she looked to the guys and said in a gentle voice, "My mom works here. She puts in a lot of effort, and she taught me not to take things that aren't mine." "Did yours?" The lobby got silent. The boys looked at her and didn't know what to say. The nanny looked ashamed. Kenya, who had finally made it to Amara's side, put a hand on her shoulder and smiled proudly. At that moment, Amara didn't need to scream, cry, or run. She had already won, because dignity doesn't have to shout to be heard. The main doors swung open again just a few minutes after the uneasy hush crept over the Grand Mariner foyer. A tall, sharply dressed man walked in. He was the kind of person who made even hotel managers stand up straight. Davenport Callum, a billionaire, CEO, a man whose last name was on glass skyscrapers all throughout the country. He was in town for a business summit, and the Grand Mariner had set up a full floor for him. He moved with silent power, followed by two helpers and a driver. His phone kept buzzing, but he didn't look up. He was used to the world changing to fit him, not the other way around. A bellhop stepped up with a clipboard as he walked across the polished marble and took out a slick leather wallet from his coat pocket. Callum stopped for a moment, lost in thought. In that brief moment, the wallet dropped from his hand and fell softly near a potted plant by the velvet lounge chairs. No one saw it fall. That's what they thought. Yes, Amara did. She had been standing close by, still holding her mother's hand. As soon as the wallet touched the floor, her eyes saw the shine. She blinked and wasn't sure for a second. Then she looked up at her mom. Kenya nodded softly. Amara let go of her hand and moved over to it. The wallet looked like it cost a lot of money. Italian leather that is smooth, initials in gold with a monogram. It didn't fit in with her reality. That wallet would have been gone in a few seconds if someone else had it. A couple people staying at the hotel saw her bend down. An older man frowned. Another woman whispered something. The people at the front desk even looked at each other. A tiny black girl scooping up a billionaire's wallet? Eyes narrowed. But Amara didn't move. She stood up straight, strode confidently toward Callum, who was already on his way to the elevator, and said firmly, "Sir, you drop this." He turned around, shocked. The room went quiet. Callum looked at the wallet, and then at the girl who was holding it out with both hands. She wasn't scared. She wasn't asking for it. She was just nice. He took his time. "Thank you," he said, blinking like he wasn't used to saying it. Amara smiled. "My mom told me not to keep things that aren't mine." Then she turned around and walked back to her mom. Callum stood there, looking at the wallet, then at the girl, and finally at the lobby full of people who had all watched what happened. He felt something new for the first time in a long time. Honor, and maybe guilt. Callum Davenport wasn't used to being surprised. But there was something about that little girl, her calmness, her confidence, and the way she pronounced those words like they were inscribed into her bones that made him feel better. He didn't go right to the elevator. Instead, he stopped, looked at his assistant, and then turned around and headed back to the lobby. Not in the direction of the front desk. Not in the direction of the business lounge. To her, Amara stood next to her mother, who suddenly appeared just as shocked and wary. Kenya straightened her back, instinctively ready to protect herself, as Callum got closer. He whispered softly, glancing down at the girl. "Excuse me. Can I ask you a question?" Amara nodded. "You could have kept it." Holding out the wallet, he replied. "No one would have known." "Why didn't you?" She didn't think twice about looking up at him. "Because it wasn't mine. My mom also thinks that things that don't belong to us shouldn't be in our pockets or our hearts." Callum blinked. That wasn't what he thought would happen. Not from someone this young. Kenya stepped in, her voice calm yet firm. "Sir, I hope she didn't make things worse." "She was just—" Callum shook his head and said, "No, ma'am. She didn't get in trouble. She brought back to mind something I hadn't thought about in a long time." He stopped for a moment, his eyes softening. "When I was a kid, there was a woman named Miss Laverne. She worked for my family. They cooked, cleaned, and helped raise me. She was a black woman. No one said thank you to her. No one truly saw her. But she was the nicest person I ever met. When I was a kid, I lost my dad's gold cufflinks in the yard. I cried for a long time. And she did find them. She could have kept them. She needed the money, that's for sure. But she didn't." He gazed at Amara once more. "You made me think of her." Kenya's eyes became softer. "Miss Laverne must have had a strong heart." "Yes," Callum said, "just like your daughter." There was a moment between them that wasn't awkward, but it was full of things that weren't said. Then Callum took a fresh $20 out of his wallet. "For her honesty," he said. Kenya shook her head softly. "No, thank you, sir. That lesson has already been paid for, every day." Callum looked at her for a long time before putting the bill away. Finally, he remarked, "I'd like to buy you both lunch. No strings. Just lunch." Kenya thought for a moment, then looked at Amara. Amara smiled and said, "We have time, Mama." And just like that, the misplaced wallet turned into a memory that neither of them would ever forget. It was only meant to be lunch. Callum Davenport had a quick supper, maybe a polite chat, and then went back to the boardroom. But 1 hour turned into 2. Then there were 3. Something had changed by the end of the afternoon. Kenya didn't talk like the women Callum normally had dinner with. She didn't show off, flirt, or drop names. She spoke gently but clearly, and when she listened, she really listened. Amara, on the other hand, went back and forth between eating grilled cheese and asking Callum questions that made him laugh out loud, real chuckles, the type he hadn't had in years. He asked them where they resided at one point. Kenya thought for a moment before saying, "A little ways off East 39th Street. It's not fancy, but it's home." That week, Callum showed up outside their apartment building in a leased vehicle without telling them, and without a driver. The area wasn't scary, it just looked old. Paint that has faded, fences that are bent, bikes for kids linked to railings that have rusted. He hit. Kenya opened the door, astonished yet calm. "Mr.," she said, "Davenport," raising her eyebrows. "Didn't expect to run into you here." He lied with a half smile. "I was in the area. I thought I'd stop by. If that's okay." She stopped for a second, then moved out of the way. She answered, "It's clean, but small." He went inside. There wasn't much to the living room. It had a small TV, a 2-seater couch, and books piled on a thrift store coffee table. But everything was clean. There were framed pictures on the walls, one of Kenya in a graduation cap, Amara when she was a newborn. There was one image of Kenya and a man Callum didn't inquire about. The smell of lemon cleanser and warm cornbread hung in the air. Callum said, "This is nice." And he meant it. Kenya said, "It's enough. We've never needed much, just love and room to breathe." They sat down and drank sweet tea. Amara came out of her room, barefoot and smiling. Callum took a checkbook out of his coat. He started by saying, "I know you said no before, but I'd like to help. For her education, maybe, or anything else you need." Kenya shook her head, this time more firmly. "Mr. Thanks, Davenport, but we don't educate Amara to tell the truth for rewards. We teach her because it's the correct thing to do." He nodded slowly, feeling little. "Can I ask," he eventually replied, "how you maintain this? Steady? With so many things going against you?" Kenya stared him in the eye. "Because the world might not see how valuable we are, but we do know it. And that's all you need to stand on." Callum drove back to his apartment that night in silence, and for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full. A week later, An invitation came. It was brought to you in a navy blue envelope with gold accent, the kind of envelope that never made it past the entrance desk of a building like Kenya's. But this time, it was sent directly to her. The annual gala of the Davenport Foundation. Formal dress code. Kenya looked at it for a long time. Why would he want us to come to something like this? She inquired out loud. Amara smiled. Maybe he wants to meet you, Mama. He could want people to perceive things the way I do. They performed their best on the night of the gala. Kenya wore a navy blue dress that she had preserved for years but never had a chance to wear. Amara donned a light pink dress and scuffed shoes that she tried to shine till they did. They got there early. There were chandeliers, champagne trays, and camera flashes in the venue. People glittered all around them. Laughter bounced off the glass walls and crystal ceilings. But when Kenya and Amara came in, everyone was quiet. People looked, not interested, not nice. A woman wearing a pearl necklace snuggled against her husband. "Is that the help?" she said softly. A man in a well-fitted tuxedo laughed. "Davenport has been very generous lately. It seems that he has taken on a project." They weren't too loud, but they were loud enough. Kenya held her head high. She has heard worse. But Amara saw everything. The looks, the phony smiles, how no one invited them to sit at their table, how servers passed by them twice before giving them drinks. Then it took place. The MC went up on stage and cleared his throat. He added in a loud voice, "We are honored to have many important people here tonight. One of our hardest working staff members is Miss Janitor Kenya Lewis." There was a break, a few clumsy claps. Someone laughed. Kenya's cheeks turned red. Not because she was ashamed, but because it hurt to be so publicly humiliated. Amara let go of her hand and walked toward the stage before she could do anything. One step at a time. By yourself. She climbed the stairs, grabbed the microphone, and stood up straight. The room stopped. She said, "My mom isn't a janitor," in a firm voice. "She's a server. And she's the most truthful person I know. You don't have to have a lot of money to be respected. All you have to do is the right thing. Be quiet." Then, a slow clap. Then one more. And one more. Callum Davenport stood in the back of the room and clapped first, louder than anyone else. People actually noticed them for the first time that night, not as a black woman and her daughter who work as waitresses, but as something much stronger, the core of the night. You could hear a pin drop for a few seconds after Amara spoke. She stood on stage, 9 years old, in a dress that didn't quite fit, beneath lights that were designed for people in tuxedos and $1,000 dresses. She didn't move an inch. In the quiet, her words still reverberated. You don't have to have a lot of money to be respected. You only need to do the right thing. It wasn't planned. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And for some reason, that made it hit harder than any speech scribbled on a gold-embossed note card. A woman with diamonds in the front row carefully lowered her glass of champagne. A man smiled like a senator and then cleared his throat and looked down. The MC, who had made Kenya look bad with that casual quip, even took a step back, as if the weight of what he had spoken had finally hit him. Amara looked at him. "You didn't even ask her name," she remarked in a gentle voice. "You just thought. My mom's name is It's Kenya Lewis, and she puts in a lot of effort. She is proud of her work, and I'm proud of her too." Someone in the audience yelled, "You tell them, baby." Applause and laughter, and suddenly the tide changed. Some individuals stood up, then a couple more. The applauding got louder and more real. Kenya stood still at the bottom of the stage, tears threatening to flow but not falling. She had always been invisible in rooms like these. Her daughter had made sure that no one could look away. Amara grinned, but not in a smug way. It was the type of smile you get when you know you've spoken what you wanted to say, even if your voice shakes. She gave the mic back to the MC, who mumbled an apology that she could hardly understand. And then she walked off the stage and into her mother's arms. "I had to say something," she said softly. Kenya held her tight. "You said it all." Callum saw the whole thing happen from across the room. He stopped clapping. He was just standing there, not moving, with his eyes shining. He realized that this little girl hadn't just told the truth to power. With one daring act, she had shifted the temperature of the whole room. Callum Davenport didn't sleep that night. He tried. He poured himself a drink, looked through his emails, and even switched on the TV. But he could see Amara on that platform every time he closed his eyes, the sound of her voice, her bravery. She stood there, totally out of place, but fully immovable. He also thought about Kenya a lot, how she turned down his check, how she never asked for anything, how she acted like she knew who she was, even when the world wouldn't see it. Callum had made up his mind before dawn. He phoned his team. "Make time for me," he said, "and call the legal department. We're doing something new." That something new turned into the Amara Initiative, a scholarship fund that helps young girls of color from working-class families pay for all of their school costs, not just paying for school, but also finding a place to live, books, a mentor, and a job. A program that wasn't made out of kindness, but out of respect. A week later, he told the press about it. No suits, no fancy words. He stood behind a microphone in a gray sweater and told the truth to the world. He said, "I've made a lot of money in my life, but a 9-year-old girl taught me what real value is. Amara Lewis told me that character isn't based on how much money you have, and that dignity isn't just for the rich." There were flashes from cameras. Writers took notes. But Callum wasn't paying attention to them. He was glancing at Kenya and Amara, who were sitting in the front row. He stood down after the speech and gave Amara the first scholarship certificate, which was printed and framed. She smiled at him, bashful yet proud. "Thanks, Mr. Callum." He got down on one knee and said, "No, Amara. Thanks for reminding me of what I forgot." Within days, the footage of the moment became viral. The news anchors played the clip again, not just about Amara, but about the millions of voices like hers that had gone unnoticed for too long. The hashtag number Hiddenworth became viral on social media. But for Amara, it wasn't about the cameras or the praise. It was about her mother, what she believed in, and about making sure that no little girl with a good heart ever had to be quiet again, just because the world wouldn't listen. Most of the world praised Callum Davenport when he started the Amara Initiative. The headlines were very positive. "Rich man puts his money where his heart is," and "CEO humbled by a child's honesty" were two headlines that got a lot of attention. Social media went crazy, but not everyone was happy. Not all of Callum's companions were happy behind closed doors. At the Davenport Holdings quarterly board meeting, there was a lot of tension just below the surface. Some of the CEOs gave each other harsh looks. Some shareholders said that there should be more focus on profitability and less on personal crusades. And then the phone rang. Richard Hale, an old-school businessman who had a $1 billion share in Callum's logistics enterprise, called him directly. "Callum," he replied in a calm voice, "I've been behind you for years. But what about this scholarship thing? Paying for poor black kids' school? It's a good story, but it sends the incorrect impression." Callum didn't move. "What does that mean, Richard? That we're giving help to people who don't deserve it? That folks like her get money just for giving back a wallet?" Callum's grasp on the phone got stronger. Richard said, "I'm pulling out. 37 million. Starting now." The line went silent. Callum lost one of his oldest investors just like that. $37 million in cash gone in a flash. His lawyers told him that other people might do the same. The press could change. The board might push back harder next quarter. But Callum didn't change his mind. He stepped into the following press conference with his head held high and said, "If doing the right thing means losing support from people who never understood the point, then that's a price I'll pay every time." Reporters rushed to get his words. Investors were surprised. The scenario changed again. Callum was no longer only making scholarships. He was putting his empire on the line for what he believed in. Kenya called him when she learned what occurred. She said, "You didn't have to go that far." He said, "You didn't either. But you did. And your daughter did too. Now it's my turn." Kenya took a long time to answer. "Well, Callum, you're not just a rich man anymore. You have roots, man. Roots are harder to shake than money." Callum didn't think about how much he had lost that night as the city lights danced across the windows of his apartment. He counted what was important: honesty, respect, and a small child who showed the world what both of them look like. 10 years went by. The world altered in both little and huge ways. The Amara Initiative became more than anyone thought it would. Hundreds more girls finished high school and then college, some with honors and some with goals grander than anyone had ever thought possible. Amara Lewis, the girl who started it all, was at the center of it all. She was 19 years old, and stood on the steps of Harvard Law School in a cap and gown. The breeze blew the tassel on her cheek. She had braids in her hair that went down her back. Her eyes were still full of the same quiet fire. And her smile, which was bright and steady like the sun, was just as bright. There were a lot of people at the ceremony. Graduates, parents, deans, and cameras. But there was a man in a modest gray suit, sitting right in front of me, on the aisle. He was older now, with silver streaks in his beard and tired eyes full of pride. Callum Davenport. He hadn't missed any of Amara's important events. Not because he had to, but because she had become like family at some point. Amara's mother was next to him in a framed picture on the empty seat where Kenya should have been. Kenya had died 2 years before, after a long fight with cancer. She never got to witness her daughter go into the courtroom. But Amara's lessons and strength were with her every step of the way. When the keynote speaker said Amara's name, she went forward and held her speech with both hands. But she didn't read from the paper. Instead, she glanced up and spoke right into the audience. My mother taught me to not take things that aren't mine. And today, I live by her values, not only in my name. This legal degree and this moment aren't just mine. It belongs to every little girl who has been ignored. For every mother who has been undervalued. Everyone who has been told they don't fit in. The audience stood up and clapped. Callum rubbed his eyes. Amara stood next to Callum later that night, when the sky was quiet outside the campus. You kept your word, she said. No, he said in a hushed voice. You kept yours. You didn't only make us proud. You made sure that everyone knew how valuable you were. She smiled. Hidden value, right? He laughed. Not so hidden anymore. Some stories lose their power over time. This one didn't. Amara's narrative was never really about a pocketbook, though. It wasn't about a billionaire, scholarships, or even a speech that went viral. It was about more than that. Something that is tough to see, yet impossible to ignore once it finds you. It had to do with character. The kind of person who is fashioned by the truth, not by money or power. By mothers who work 2 jobs and still find time to braid their daughter's hair. By small girls who speak up when it's simpler to be quiet. By men who realize that people, not dollars, are what make a legacy. Amara didn't want to be the face of a movement. Kenya never wanted to be a symbol of strength in the face of danger. And what about Callum? He never thought that a child's remarks in a hotel lobby would affect him. But that's the thing with character. It shows up when you least expect it and in people you wouldn't normally notice, unless you're paying attention. So, here's the truth. You don't need a lot of money to be a leader. You don't need a platform to make a difference. And you don't have to wait for someone to tell you it's okay to do the right thing. There might be a Amara in your life. A kid who can see the world clearly, even when the world can't see them. Or maybe you're Kenya, keeping your family together with quiet strength and teaching them virtues that will last longer than money. Or maybe you're Callum, finally ready to listen, learn, and stand for more than just statistics on a screen. No matter who you are or where you are right now, keep this in mind. Things that are worth anything don't stay hidden forever. And sometimes, all it takes is one voice or one brave act to bring it to light. Share this tale if it made you feel something. Talk about it. Live it. And if you've ever met someone like Kenya, who was there for you without asking for anything in return, please tell us about them in the comments. Because the world needs more stories like this one. You're watching Hidden Worth, where we don't just share stories. We pay tribute to the people who made them.